hey. Hi there, friends. My name's Matt, and this is the first video in what's probably going to be a series of videos about technology and education and the integration of digital technology into the classroom. It's going to be a pretty niche series. We're probably going to talk about capitalism a bit, too. I'm sorry. The title will be like... So we're going to talk about the Hybrid Pedagogy podcast, specifically episode 10 called Questioning Learning with Amy Collier. The episode's about best practices and learning outcomes and what they refer to as a paradigm shift in the relationship between teacher and student. When thinking about best practices, Collier says we need to ask ourselves, best practices for who? And best practices to do what? In education, the notion of best practices is built around standardization. In effect, stripping away individual choices and personal skills and interests that drive us, creating a little tiny army of clones. There's also a whole section on learning outcomes being far too rigid, which prevents the risk-taking and uncertainty that we kind of want when we're trying to discover new things and learn new skills. And they talk about online courses, which, basically just recreate the worst aspects of traditional education, but are somehow more impersonal. Yeah, so I like the podcast a lot. I think that the student-teacher relationship slowly being phased out of education is not great. I think that the idea of a teacher becoming basically an enhanced grader is sort of shit. I hate the idea of online canned courses, though I do think that they kind of missed the ball by not talking about that money. But it's not that kind of podcast. I get it. There's a lot of talk about education being standardized, and learning outcomes and assessment of students consisting of checking boxes, and what amount to filling out a standardized form, ensuring adherence to some level of Bloom's taxonomy. So the whole thing reminds me of bureaucracy, our increasing need to codify everything into neat little sets of rules that govern, well, everything, and correct, shall we say, deficits, and create a Utopia of rules? Nailed it. That was good. The Utopia of Rules, on Technology, Stupidity, and the Secret Joys of Bureaucracy. This is a collection of essays by David Graeber, and it's basically a critique of bureaucracy from the perspective of the left. In the opening to the book, Graeber says, "We no longer like to think about bureaucracy, yet it informs every aspect of our existence. Bureaucracy has become the water in which we swim." Later, Graeber argues, especially in North America, we've created a bureaucratized notion of freedom. That bureaucracy, it's believed, in effect acts as a bulwark against authoritarianism. And that's bad? He argues that it doesn't actually work in preventing authoritarianism, and maybe actually the opposite? Whether motivated by a faith in rationality or a fear of arbitrary power, the end result of this bureaucratized notion of freedom is to move towards the dream of a world where play has been limited entirely, or at best, boxed away in some remote location far from any serious consequential human endeavor, while every aspect of life is reduced to some kind of elaborate rule-bound game. So another thing the video reminded me of, and it's another thing that people don't like to talk about, and I promise it's related, is the morality or amorality of technology. And when we're talking about digital technology, I think there's a tendency, which is potentially very dangerous, when talking about things like smartphones and the internet, I want to talk about the positive things without considering the context in which they and we exist. Technology is far from neutral. How is technology distributed? Who is distributing these technologies? What does technology allow those who have power to do? Technology doesn't exist in a vacuum. The inequities in wealth and power that we see in our society are reflected in the inequities of power we see in technology. Yes, even the internet. The democratizing force that is the internet. Also, most technological progress nowadays is through R&D funded by the US military, so, take from that what you will. The technologies that emerged were in almost every case the kind that proved most conducive to surveillance, work discipline, and social control. Computers have opened up certain spaces of freedom, as we're constantly reminded, but instead of leading to the workless utopia Abby Hoffman or Gita Bort imagined, they have been employed in such a way as to produce the opposite effect. And honestly, this quote is too long. Flexible work regimes. Just pause it. Pause it if you want to read it, and we'll move on. So this is from an essay called Of Flying Cars and the Declining Rate of Profit. And it's just great. In it, Graeber argues pretty persuasively that increasing bureaucratization of society in general, and of higher education specifically, has led to a reduction in the kinds of unpredictability and risk-taking that is necessary for innovation to really happen. And this ties into the notion of emergence from the Hybrid Pedagogy podcast. Hey, we did it! Full circle! Really felt like we were going off the rails there for a second. Basically, education is bureaucratizing through rigid learning outcomes and best practices. And what do I have here? That kills creativity, and now we're never going to have flying cars or hoverboards or whatever. I promise I'm not a Luddite. Okay, that's it. Hey, little Becky. Is it going? So, this is my cat, Panko. Like, comment, subscribe. This engagement. This is quality content. Look at how cute she is. I guess I'll just talk about some books. So I talk about this book by David Graeber like 6 times. It's really good. Check it out. There's also this paper that I'm going to put right here. It's about the morality or amorality of technology. It's really good. I probably stole some stuff from it by accident. And then there's this quote that I'm going to pop up right here. It's in this, and I couldn't find a way to shoehorn it into the video, so here it is now. It's called Deserting the Digital Utopia. It's worth a read. Check it out! Bye!